every time we fall asleep at night, each of our minds, in this analogy, that your mind represents infinite consciousness. So imagine that your mind is not a limited mind. Imagine that your mind is infinite consciousness, in the sense that you are capable of having any dream. All dreams possible to be dreamed could be dreamt by each of us tonight. We don't know what we're going to dream. However, tonight, each of us will have a dream, or most of us will have a dream. However, so in this dream that we have tonight, we will dream a new world. It won't be the world that we're familiar with, the streets of Amsterdam. It will be a complete, at a different realm. It could be any kind of a dream. However, in order to experience that new dreamed world, we will have to enter into our own dream and view that dream from the perspective of somebody in the dream. In other words, when we dream at night, we forget that we are dreaming, unless we're lucid dreaming. We'll come back to that. We forget, the mind forgets that it is comfortably asleep in Amsterdam. It dreams a whole new world within itself. But in order to experience that world, it has to contract into a person in that world. It enters, our mind contracts, and it enters into its own imagination as a separate subject of experience, from whose point of view it is able to know the new dreamed world. So that is a model. Go back now to infinite consciousness. Infinite consciousness contains everything within it, just as our minds, relatively speaking, contain all dreams within them in potential. But in order to experience the world, this world, infinite consciousness has to contract. It has to enter its own imagination. It dreams the world within itself, but in order to experience that world, it has to forget itself. This is the key to your answer. It has to forget itself. It has to overlook itself. It's called ignorance in the Vedantic tradition. It's called the fall in the Christian tradition. It has to forget itself. It has to enter into its own imagination. It has to shrink and contract into a separate subject of experience. That's each of us. The difference between the dream that each of our minds has at night and the dream of infinite consciousness is that we can only have one dream at a time. We dream sequentially, whereas consciousness can have innumerable dreams consecutively. And each of our minds are like dreams in the mind of infinite consciousness, or in God's mind, from whose point of view infinite consciousness is able to view its own potential as the world. But there is a price to pay, and this is the answer to your question. Just as each of our minds at night has to forget that it is dreaming and believe that it is a separate individual in the dreamed world, so infinite consciousness has to forget or overlook the knowing of its own infinite being and seem to become a separate individual. Now that separate individual feels cut off from and separate from everyone and everything else, which is just how most people feel. And because of that feeling of being cut off, the separate self feels that it is a fragment and vulnerable. Now, these two feelings that are inherent in the sense of being a separate self, I am a fragment, I'm not the whole, and therefore I am vulnerable. And these two feelings, in order to allay, in order to get over the feeling of being a fragment, the separate self is continually trying to unite with others, to find completion or fulfillment through activities and relationships, through objects, substances, activities. So one movement of the separate self is always to acquire, to seek fulfillment through an object, a substance, a relationship. That's one movement that is inherent in the separate self. And the other movement, in order to overcome the feeling of vulnerability, is to protect itself. I don't like you. Resistance. These are the two modes of the separate self, seeking and resistance. Although all the separate self is truly seeking is to be divested of its sense of separation and go back to its original wholeness. But it doesn't know that because it feels separate, so it tries to complete itself through seeking and protect itself through resistance. And from the point, and as a result of these two activities, from the point of this separate self, the separate self will do things to others that it would not do to itself, because it has forgotten that it is one with the other. So the separate self is able to act in ways that take advantage of other people, that are unkind to other people, that are cruel to other people, as long as those activities make it feel better about itself. So that's why it's possible for there to be unjust, unkind, unloving behavior. And yet the fact that there is such behavior doesn't contradict the fact that everyone and everything ultimately is made out of a single, infinite, indivisible, and loving consciousness. And that is why it is incumbent on all of us. It is our sacred duty, those of us that have either understood or who have begun to understand, and that includes everybody here, that separation and the terrible things that happen as a result of it is an illusion. And therefore our first duty in life, our first duty above all other duties, is to realize the non-separate nature of our being with all others and things, and to live the implication of that understanding.